Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. So we're now at the end of chapter 18, final chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And we've got one or two topics, I think, left. Though it's the end. We said really more or less what's to be said, but nevertheless, there's a little bit more to come. And the topic is Krishna's appeal to Arjuna to reach the eternal abode. So there's verse 59 to 66, which we'll complete today. So in all, in our sadhana, we don't know from our sadhana what this X, this God factor is, but yet this is what we're striving for, this self. So we've got to do everything in our capacity to give ourselves that awareness and get to that periphery so we become that state of God. And there's no separation. So you get back to that self. So what we can do is we can raise our, as in the chapter, it gave us the 3 gunas, the different personality traits, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And we have the ability, and it's our duty, as it were, or why we exist, to raise our capacity, our being to sattva. So it becomes trans-sattva. So that's what we can do. And we use all the indicative pointers and all the practices to refine ourselves to get to that stage where we can transform ourselves. But in 59, he was putting forward, if you don't get on with it, if you have an ego is that resistance to flowing freely in the world. It's that separateness. If you maintain that, you're going nowhere. And as a matter of fact, you have a nature, and that will constrain you, that will force you to act helplessly. You will act helplessly in accordance to your nature anyway. So you may as well get on with what you're supposed to do. Realize it so that you don't get a backlog of more vasanas to do. Even, sometimes whatever you might say, oh, I don't need X or Y. If it's to do with you and if it belongs to you, you must take it so it doesn't carry forward your quota in, if you believe in the theory of reincarnation. So whatever you need to do, you must get it done. You must act on it. So in 61, he was talking about the self backs all of your perceptions, emotions, and thoughts and vasanas. So in that case, you've got to get onto that devotion, cultivate that devotion, that surrender, that humility. Use that intellect to gain that knowledge to distinguish between what's what. Recognize, like he gave the example of the puppeteer. If we're so involved in the world, we don't recognize what's beyond that. Just as the puppeteer, when the children are watching the puppet show, they don't see anything but the characters on the stage. They don't see the strings being manipulated by an individual. that bigger perspective. So we don't see that. So in which case we're given this awareness to be able to perceive that, to be able to gain those attributes, pointers, and direct ourselves, channelize that. So in 63 we did last week, he says, okay, now I've given you everything. He uses yata ishtati tata kuru. He says, now I've told you all the knowledge, I've given you it. Now you do whatever you like. So that's the idea of this type of knowledge, or any scriptural knowledge. Knowledge is never given, it's taken. And it's no secret. Though everywhere across the scriptures it's saying it's a secret, secret, secret. Chapter 9, royal secret, royal knowledge, royal secret. This is never a secret. This word guya, it's not a secret. It's only a secret because we don't delve into it because of our involvement in the world. We don't see it. We make up things which are supposed to be religious. We do rituals. We think we're on our path if we have satsang. But you could just be in a community feeling good about it, but doing nothing. So unless you move on refining yourself, your thoughts, your perceptions, your vasanas, it doesn't matter if you belong to a religion as such, or a philosophy or not. What matters is that you call it what you like or not. What matters is that you actually refine your thoughts to very few, your perceptions, your emotions. So you become objective. So you become out of that worldly, mundane values. So he says, act as you will. You know, I've given you the knowledge, now you do as you will. Because when we have so many thoughts, why does he say that? Anybody? Why does it declare that? What are the pros and what are the reasons?
Because of the nature of our mind, that is the nature of the mind is to always go extrovert, go externally, whereas the guhyam, the royal knowledge, is inward within, aham brahmasmi. And it's not natural for the mind to turn inward. And also because the knowledge is so subtle, it needs to be experienced. It is not an object of perception, but a subject of experience.
So he's given all the knowledge. You do what you like. Mind goes outward. Also, if you're on this path, it doesn't need any advertising as such for that person who wants it. Subtler things, people, as you refine yourself, you see the subtler things. If you don't, you never get it. It doesn't matter what advertising you give it. In our case, we have to put forward advertising to let people know we're available, but nothing more than that. But we need to at least do that. But it can't be an imposition. The best of things not known. He says it in a liberal sense. So now do what you will. Because we do have vasanas. We do need to pursue our path with whatever our nature is. To that extent, we can latch onto it and go that way, we will. We just have to increase that. But anything creative or anything which is going beyond that ascharya, anything to flourish needs space and time. It needs nurturing. It gives us that liberal license to do that. So this fellow's on the battlefield. He better hurry up. He can't just do what he likes in a way. He can't sit there forever. But given all of the knowledge, and hopefully something's percolated into him, now in accordance to his vasanas, he will do his best. But nobody can put that imposition on you. You have to choose to do it. And a mind not tuned in, it's no point. Can't force it. You can just make the knowledge available. And it's up to the individual. So now you do as you like. This freedom, there's license to be free and liberal. All knowledge and truth will be like that. Not licentious, but just liberal, different. So now we start on 64. 64.
सर्वगुह्यतमं भूय शृणु मे परमं वचः इष्टोषि मे दृढमिति sorry ततो वक्ष्यामि ते हितम्.
Sam, if you could, you read the verse.
Hear again my supreme word, the most secret of all. You are dear to me, so I will speak what is good for you.
Mm-hmm. So it's not that he hasn't been giving this knowledge anyway already. So here again. So often when it comes to the end of the text, the student invariably will ask the teacher that, okay, give me a few tips. So it's given in an Upanishadic style. The Bhagavad Gita is, though some may not say it's an Upanishad, but it's still got that style of it. So we say it's as good as like an Upanishad. So at the end of the Upanishad, or end of the text, he's giving now, he says he'll give it again. So 64. You're dear to me. He says with great affection. The relationship between the teacher and taught, for it to go anywhere, has to have that rapport, that affection, allows things, that emotion, to move smoothly. So he says, let me give you, it's like Arjuna asking for tips. Like sometimes at the end, when we come to the end of this, we might bring out the points, tips, where we can be practical. And it's also a indication that the knowledge isn't finished. You've not got it all and you're getting it. So there's still a thirst for the knowledge, as it were. So it follows a tradition. Let's read it.
Here, okay, 64, I'll read it again. Hear again my supreme word, the most secret of all. You are dear to me, so I will speak what is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 63 completes the Lord's sermon. Krishna leaves Arjuna to choose to act as he pleases. Yet here, Krishna offers to repeat the supreme knowledge with a personal advice to him. a gesture conforming to Vedic tradition. At the end of the Guru's sermon in an Upanishad, the disciple lingers for more knowledge. The disciple asks for further lessons, particular instructions for him. The Guru thus gives his specific advice to the yearning disciple. Conforming to this tradition, Krishna wraps up his sermon with a personal note of advice to Arjuna. Arjuna has presumably gestured to the Lord for such advice through his eagerness to learn. In an expression of fondness for Arjuna, Krishna gives his final guideline for attaining spiritual enlightenment.
So all of us at the end, if we were to come to the end of the chapter, and we're wondering, actually, we've gone through so many verses, what's this actually about? What are we supposed to do? So he's just giving the tips with that. Okay, let me tell you in a nutshell what we're supposed to do. Let's go. 65.
Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mameva ishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me.
Peter, if you could read the verse.
Fix the mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, bow down to me. Truly, I promise you shall come to me alone. You are dear to me.
So, from the sounds of this verse, we've heard quite a bit of this before. Fix the mind on me, be devoted to me. So he's, and remember, me always means the self. It doesn't mean Mr., Mrs. X. But it's not personal, but it's made personal. So the devotional person, or we all have that devotion in a sense, can identify that with themselves. So Arjuna is the student, Krishna is the master, the guru. So if you're coming with me, I will tell you the best. Me, as we recognize it as the self. So devoted to me, bhakti. Sacrifice to me, karma. Bow down truly to me, I shall promise. So essentially, physically, emotionally, and intellectually, if you focus all your activities on something bigger than just that self, pointing out here, inevitably, one will get there. It's with that emotion is saying it. Focus on me. That open eye meditation at the backdrop of every activity. No self-interest, just for the purpose of something bigger, where you're striving for that universality, not that division, not that separateness. That objectivity in goods and bads of what you perceive, feel, and think in the world. The capacity to be objective. Sometimes the Puranas, the parables, put forward ideas in such a way that they seem ridiculous. But it's just to give you that objective stance. You see Ganesha with a rat, riding on a rat, with huge ears. It's to just symbolize going beyond the pairs of opposites. How can an elephant ride on a rat? And you see different sorts of actions. all sorts of different stories. So in terms of sacrifice, in terms of your devotion to the higher, you fix that in your mind. In terms of sacrifice, we always feel as though sacrifice is where we suffer. But in actual fact, it's only when you forgo your own interest, actually you enjoy. So the concept is all skew in society today. So when you look at the bigger picture and you do it for something bigger, you also are the benefactor and you enjoy. You've got to get into that spirit of things, where your mind is a confluence with your intellect in terms of your activity. Your thinking agrees with your emotional devotion, or your devotion isn't blind, but it's backed by the thought of refinement. So you're dear to me, that one who gets into that spirit of things. Let's have a read of it. Let's read.
Lord Krishna gives his final piece of advice in these verses 65 and 66. It contains the quintessential philosophy of the Gita, oft quoted as the Lord's assurance for ultimate liberation to mankind. The intellect must fix the mind in the self in every transaction of life. The mind devoted to the supreme providence. The body direct all effort towards attaining the self. Thus, the surrender of the complete personality assures self-realization. With all his love, Krishna promises Arjuna he would attain that goal.
You know, if you think about, sometimes we mindlessly scroll through things or watch the TV or whatever it may be, something like that, or we're blank, our thoughts are not anywhere, but we're just mindlessly doing that. But imagine if you are actually proactively focused on something bigger, and you're not mindlessly observing your world, but you observe all that goes on, even your activities, but you've got your thoughts fixed on somewhere bigger. So you don't get stressed and tired in that way, because the focus is on somewhere bigger. In actual fact, it fuels you. But when it's mindless and not focused on something bigger, it actually just sucks the energy out of you. So imagine it's just we're watching a movie. There's no need to watch any other movie. There's so many movies going on. And your thoughts rest on somewhere. Your feelings and your activities are dedicated to something bigger. You see it for what it is, and you just keep moving on. Let's go.
Sarvadharman parityagya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva bhapebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchau.
So, Tim, if you could read the verse.
Verse 66. Relinquishing fully all dharmas, natures, take refuge in me alone. I will liberate you from all sins. Grieve not.
So this is a very famous verse. Sarva dharma parityagya mamekam sarva namvraja. It's a very famous verse saying, I shall liberate you. Don't worry, you get moksha. So what is it talking about? If you can renounce meaning your involvement with your perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, all dharmas. The body, mind, and intellect is in a constant pursuit of the world. So if one can pitch up that bigger value, place it on the self, inevitably, whatever your vasanas are, you go through it, you do it with full on. But there's always a focus on the self. With that consistency of purpose, he says, Ma Suchaha, don't worry, you'll get that moksha. You'll be liberated. You're not agitated. Sin is just that agitation. So don't worry. Why he says don't worry is when we think of worry, grieve not, it's always about the future. I will liberate you from all sins, grieve not. So to grieve, whether you'll get it or not, whether you'll get that moksha or not, that worry, that result orientation, get the focus off the result. Just keep doing what you've got to do. That's it. Go through your vasanas. You don't know actually your vasanas. Let them come up and deal with them. So in terms of many philosophers, prophets, evolved people, Christ, empty thyself, I shall fill thee, in the sense that don't get involved in the world and everything gets sorted out. You have to go into your world and relate and contact your world and deal with your vasanas. Don't get involved. Be objective. It's the advice. So surrender your mind on something higher when you're dealing with all the world things of color, form, all the senses, all the dharmas. One's own dharma, swadharma. Be objective. So dharmas are all the things in essence, whatever they are, whatever your nature is, the plural aspect, focus on that one truth. Let's read it. Let's be intrigued.
In verse 65, the Lord showed Arjuna the physical, mental, and intellectual disciplines to be observed for self-realization. Herein, he provides the practical way to reach that goal. Verse 66 is considered among the most important verses in the Gita. The Lord advises Arjuna to relinquish his individuality and focus his entire attention upon the Supreme Self. He will then be liberated from his terrestrial bondage.
So one thing to note is throughout the Gita, we're actually told to pick up swadharma. There's a stage where it's not just swadharma pushes you forward to give you that smooth movement in your evolution. But that becomes secondary when your focus is on getting to the truth, because that's swadharma as such. So it transforms itself that way.
Dharma means essential being, that essential nature of a thing which precisely defines it, which makes it what it is, without which it ceases to be what it is. The Dharma of sun is light. Dharma of fire is heat, of sugar, sweetness. Likewise, the Dharma of all human beings is the one supreme self, Atman.
So that means if that's our dharma, that's what we're after. Why would we go after anything else? So we got to recognize that.
In the verse here, the Lord uses the word dharma in the plural, advises Arjuna to renounce all dharmas, obviously not referring to the one homogeneous self within all beings. Dharmas used herein therefore must refer to the different essential natures which constitute the heterogeneous variety of human beings. Every human being has his individual dharma as well, a distinct nature of his own, his inherent tendencies, the vasanas. Your vasanas constitute your personality, define your individuality. You are what you are because of your vasanas. Without your vasanas, you will cease to be what you are. That is your essential being, your distinct individualistic nature.
Mm-hmm. So we understand we all have vasanas, we all have a particular type of nature. But that's plural. We've got to move off that. That's good.
Your vasanas express themselves through your body as perception and action, through your mind as feeling, through intellect as thought. Thus, the dharma of your body is to perceive and act, the dharma of your mind to feel, the dharma of your intellect to think. Your perception and action, feeling and thought, being a faithful expression of your vasanas. Krishna appeals to mankind to relinquish fully these dharmas, to renounce your involvement and attachment to perception and action, feeling and thought. The practice of such detachment has to be total. Hence, the Lord emphasizes that you renounce them all completely.
So that detachment, this word detachment in itself has is a huge topic in itself. In actual fact, the whole of the scriptures is talking about that detachment. In order to move forward, we can discuss that. Let's continue.
Having extricated yourself from your terrestrial entanglement, you should direct your mind to single-pointed meditation upon the Supreme Self, which the Lord refers to as me. Continue this practice till all sins, vasanas, are exhausted. Grieve not, says the Lord. It is a caution against result orientation. Do not become anxious of attaining the fruit of action. With the past entanglement, overcome your anxiety for the ultimate goal of realization must also be given up. Then will you attain spiritual enlightenment.
So he says in the verse, I will liberate you. The more your sins, grieve not. But the point is, it's like a nice, good support. If you follow actually what's being said, you get liberated yourself. So, Masuchaha, don't worry, don't grieve. You'll get liberation. But you get liberation following all of this, not otherwise. So nobody can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And one can't have the focus on the result at any stage. So one may have a goal of liberation, but when it comes to it in the meditation, you can't even have it there. You've got to drop that goal. Otherwise you get hooked onto it. It's like holding on to the pole where it's a pole vaulter. If you hold on to the pole, you don't cross over. You don't cross over that bar. So if you hold on to even the goal of liberation, that thought, You won't transcend. So you've got to drop that. Everything in that worldly perspective of any involvement, got to drop. Just got to watch it like a movie. Pursue it and watch it. No worry, no anxiety. Come what may, good, bad, indifferent, you do your best. If it doesn't turn out quite right, keep going. And so everything has its cause and effect. So you just got to keep going. Not worry about it. The minute you worry about it, you got stuck. The minute you don't do what you're supposed to do, you leave that stone unturned. You've got to do it later. So clearly think, make your own structure in life of what you're supposed to do at each stage, and don't delay, just get it done. Otherwise you have to carry it forward in the next life, if you can conceive that. So any questions before we move forward? Tim.
Final part of the verse, grieve not, and the final paragraph of the commentary talks about grieving not. This is a sort of taking the famous verse a little bit further, the wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead. So this is grieving not for any action or thought or emotion. So it's
what happens when we grieve, or when we, in the sense we have a, what's happening to us? One should assess that. When you get upset and you grieve, or when you focuses that sort of, I didn't get that, so you get upset. Your desire is halted, obstructed. So you're actually losing time on what you've got to do next. So you're losing that scope. You're never actually getting to the crux of being free in your worry and anxiety. So that much time is consumed, that much you don't get done, that much you're further away from your truth. So can't afford it. It's understanding what you got to do is do it.
But doesn't grieving refine what you need to do next in some way?
Explain.
Well, you've got to decide what to do next. And maybe the last thing you did wasn't the right thing to do. So you don't grieve, but you move on. But that grieving in English is sort of deciding and refining what you need to do next. It's reflecting on what you did.
No, reflecting and grieving is, grieving is you get caught up, but maybe I don't get it. Maybe what will happen, or that happen. It's an upsetness. But if you do something and you reflect on it, you think, shouldn't have quite done that. You're not getting hung up by it. So you're not getting upset. You understand that, okay, from that came that, maybe could have done it differently. So your next approach with that assessment would be better informed. And you understand in your emotion at this stage, if you've not got that emotional stamina, it hurts you. In actual fact, the worry that you might not get liberation could, it's that I won't get that goal, I won't get that success. But the success comes from actually what you do in your present action. So you need to, whatever's gone before that, good, bad, indifferent, you need to utilize your past in the most positive way. So even if it's a negative situation, yes, you do reflect on it, but then you bring that forward and you don't get stuck with that anxiousness. Maybe I get it, maybe I won't, maybe this. You don't get stuck with that. Keep moving forward. So you've got that objectivity. So our mind flips us off the track into worry, anxiety, that grief, that result orientation, and that saps your energy, so it doesn't allow you to move forward. So that happens to each one of us at different stages, and we become result orientated. So what good does that do you? It holds you back from your focus. So it's not saying don't reflect, it's just saying don't get anxious about it. Don't worry. If you put in the actions, you get it. If you worry about it, you sap your energy about thinking about, that's what I want, that's what I want, that's what, you don't get it. You get consumed by it. So even at the stage of moksha, one can't afford to have that result orientation. I want moksha. Got to drop the thought. Got to drop the pole. That's it.
Can I just ask really a follow-up question to Tim's? And I suppose where this might differ from something like mindfulness is you're sort of encouraged perhaps more in mindfulness to experience those emotions to the full and not try and sort of cast them out of your mind. And my concern with this, I mean, I understand it's sort of getting to another level, perhaps stage of life than day-to-day things, but my concern with this part of the verse is it's suggesting that you do something which isn't really in your nature, which is to try and withdraw from experiencing those emotions to the full. And is that not conflicting with somebody's vasanas? And I don't really, if the aim is to exhaust all one's vasanas, then it would be natural that you wouldn't really need this instruction to grieve not, because you wouldn't experience grief. So my concern is that it's a premature instruction.
It's actually grieve not. So I will liberate you from all your sins, grieve not. So it's actually at the end of the text. And in all, unless you are objective to what you're doing, it's very difficult to actually feel the thrust of your emotions, your thoughts, because there's always a tinge, when there's a tinge of your mind playing. Remember when we say mindfulness, or when one says mindfulness, it's like a presence of mind, and in Vedanta, it just means it's a presence of your intellect meaning keeping your mind. So if we just understand it in that sense. But so when I say mind, I mean that which is wandering. So when you experience any perception, emotion, thought, be very present to it because you're objective. But if there's things which are murking it up, different worries or anxieties, stresses about the scenario, it blurs your mind to be able to focus, to your intellect to be able to take your mind to focus on something. It doesn't allow, the mind gets involved, so it's got no direction, as it were. So here at the end, this instruction is actually just a support to you. Don't worry, you'll get it. Actually, nobody can give you that liberation. Don't worry, if you put in all the efforts, it will happen. That's more what it should be saying. But he's giving you that confidence. Like sometimes when we have a person, hey, I'll give you an example of myself. When you play your game of tennis, you can't do certain activities, but then the person helping you says, don't worry, you can do it. And then you do it, and you get that sudden confidence to keep your mind on the present, to actually whack it one. So it's taking you away from what you feel your mind's fuzzy. So it's giving you a construct to focus on something bigger and not to worry, not to be consumed by the worry. So in actual fact, at this stage, relinquishing all dharmas, you're at that stage where you've refined your dharma, you've refined your swadharma. Now you make sure every stage you're objective, and in that stage of meditation, you've got very few thoughts. So you're right, it's at that stage. Prior to that, if we come back to it, what you're suggesting, could it be premature, this instruction? Could it be a little bit naive? It's not telling you not to be proactive or informed about what you're thinking, doing, being. It's not saying don't have full emotions. It's actually understanding that you're at a state where you understand those emotions. So when you're a child fighting the other child, you don't understand, you just got that eager emotion to fight because of something didn't go your way. So there's a lot of energy there. But when you grow up, you can see the children fighting, you kind of understand it, you feel deeply for what they're fighting for, but you don't get involved in it because you've got something bigger to pursue. In fact, if anything, you might get involved if only necessary, but to bring it apart and get them to understand. If you know that they can't understand, just let them get on with it. You do your bit and you don't worry about it. You don't get anxious. So our perceptions, emotions, and thoughts are always tripping us up. When they come to a refinement of gaining liberation, they will still trip us up, as the nature of the mind plays. As long as you've got some vasana or thought, even right up to liberation, you can mess it up. So he's giving us, don't worry, grieve not, don't focus on the result, because you'll mess it up, that attachment. You've got to drop that thought, desire. This is at the end. Prior to that, it's also the same thing. That doesn't mean for 1 minute that you're not human, you're more human. You feel more about things that are going on, disasters that are happening, people that are facing some atrocity, or your own emotions of relation to others. But you know how to direct it and keep going so it refines you rather than disrupts you. I don't know if it makes sense, or if that's what you were thinking about, or something else. It's very difficult to be mindful unless you are refining your thoughts. Because the minute you try to hold your mind, some other thought comes in. So that the mindfulness is when you have got yourself on something bigger, you can be mindful more easily to everything else, because it's not in that relation to something to disrupt you, as it were, and keep going. I don't know if it makes sense. Anybody? Tim?
I often find myself asking you, is this a famous verse in the Gita? And in the commentary, Parthasarathy says this is, verse 66 is considered among the most important verses. And is that because he puts in bold in his commentary that you need to renounce your involvement and attachment with perception, action, feeling, thought? Is that why it's such a critical verse? It's taking,
So it's
not even doing renunciation, it's just relinquish it and then you get to the self.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. And whatever your nature is, you need to be objective in it. If your nature is to be a sportsman or say a painter or something, whatever your nature is, if you're involved in it, that's where you trip up. So you've got to renounce that. So if you've got, your nature is to get to the self, you've got to be objective there too. It's famous on that point of you've got to just be objective, let go to all of it, and that detachment. So the detachment doesn't mean that you don't do what you've got to do. It just means you're objective to it. Just get on and do what it is. Keep that elbow room. Don't be affected by the outcome. Just do what you've got to do. Yeah, it's famous for us.
And so Arjuna is hearing this, and
yes.
Arjuna, the Kshatriya, the warrior, he's being advised to detach himself, to disengage himself from his dharma.
From his emotional makeup, from his just get on and do it. See the reason you got to do it and get on and do it. And even that you'll leave behind when you're focused on the self. So just act as your nature is, objectively. Your Kshatriya, play it. Don't get involved in it. You're focused on getting to self, don't get involved in it, just keep going and do it. Vidya, you had something.
Yes, Babaji. This is a verse where when you study Hinduism, they call this Sharanagati, which is total surrender.
Mm.
So this is the form of how you invoke bhakti. So basically, you're surrendering yourself to something higher than you, and you are putting your trust in the Lord, so to speak. And how to do that, he's saying, is to relinquish that emotions and attachment. And to speak to what Peter and Tim were saying earlier, grief is an emotion of the mind, not so much of the intellect. So you grieve because you're emotional, and that's the forefront of the mind's action, which is it immediately reacts, it responds, whereas the intellect pauses and it reflects to say, okay, is this permanent? Is this temporary? And that reflection is required. The work of the intellect is required in any exigency, but not so much the emotions of the mind. In planning the way forward, it's not like we completely surrender and say, oh, I'm not going to look after my body. It's up to God to look after my body. No, I need to do my exercises. I need to eat healthy. And that is an action that's taken by the intellect, not so much by the mind. The mind just gives in. It's fickle. So it just gives in. And this Sharanagati concept has been explained very beautifully in lots of Hindu mythology, the stories where they talk about complete surrender and how, people had faith in Lord, and the Lord comes in the penultimate moment to save them, to grace them. And these mythology, the stories are being told because that's a way of invoking people to, trust in something higher. For people who can't take to kind of studies like Bhagavad Gita, these stories help them cultivate that bhakti.
So the idea is that emotion is we often talk about emotion, and sometimes it can feel a little bit callous or cold. It's actually not to enable your emotions to govern you, but if your intellect has a say in your emotions, you can govern your emotions to a refinement, so it's has a purity in it, that you can have that purity of emotion instead of the emotion governing you so it runs you down. It actually gives you some beauty of being human, oils it. Guru, you had something before we...
Yeah. Baruji, I just had a question on this particular verse. It says, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, which means, you can take refuge in me. In this verse, does it mean that Krishna is saying, as a God, you would take refuge in me? Or is it really the act of self-realization? Is it really the aspect of self-realization that you take refuge in, not in a specific individual or a God?
Yeah, it's just a self. Just there's even the word self is the same as saying Krishna or a God. They're words, they're all words. We don't know what this self is unless you get it, become it. So they're all indicators to get there. So when you put an individual there, it helps personalize it. You will get a better understanding. It's another same species as you in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you say when one religion says you're talking about an individual, not a God, then there's a misinterpretation. It's not saying that.
Yeah.
It's just to help you. It's not to personalize it. So this idea of God, X, self, Brahman, Atman, Krishna, Muhammad, Christ, whoever, whatever, is just their words to move you beyond what they're known, so they move you to something which is not terrestrial, something transcendental. That's the idea.
Yeah. Then I'm able to corroborate it with one of the earlier verses where he says, those are the fools who probably worship me as God. So I think it kind of goes in line.
Okay, it might be gods, plural. Yeah. Here it's saying, get over the dharmas, not dharma, singular.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Emerson says, every man, what is it? Every man is a divinity in disguise, God playing the fool. And send on that.